Now, banks are at kind of an interesting forefront, and I wanted to definitely pull up some bank logos to illustrate this fact. At the very least, it's somewhat interesting to me. For instance, you look at Wells Fargo in the bottom right. Their choice of typography there is kind of this transitional typeface. To me, at the very least, communicates heavily tradition, that they've been here for a long time and they're not changing their ways anytime soon. They have their tradition, they have their history, and that's what sets them apart from a lot of these other banks that we're going to be looking at, who once upon a time had a very similar typeface to Wells Fargo, where it was set in that transitional spectrum. However, now a lot of these companies, Capital One, Bank of America, Citi, and Chase, they have all gone for the option of appearing more modern, right? Because a huge thing in banking right now is your access to online banking to be as secure and as quote unquote advanced as possible, to be at the forefront of all of these technological advancements. So, in order to communicate that, you're not going to want a transitional typeface. You're not going to want something that feels old timey and historical. That's to a certain degree making you feel like you're set in the past. Whereas Chase and Capital One and Citi, they've all gone for these logos that are communicate the future, right? That are communicating you're leaving the past behind and going to what is current, what is at the state of the art, if you will, of banking technology. So it's interesting to me to look at how Wells Fargo and HSBC, a few other banks, have stuck to their roots, right? Have stuck to that traditional feeling where a lot of these other companies have gone for a more modern, state of the art approach. And then last but not least, I wanted to go ahead and look at a few companies that were, to say kindly, in unique dispositions, right? So BP is a little bit of old news at this point. However, I still remember when they had that horrible oil spill, right? And I'm sure a lot of us do. So, looking at their logo choice from that moment forward, it is communicating the exact opposite of how they were perceived during that time. Their logo communicates the most like earth-friendly green company you could imagine. If you didn't know what BP stood for, I mean, this could be like they make soil or they're all about recycling or something like that. That's what their logo communicates. That's what their choice of type communicates. That BP off to the right, more than likely, it looks to me like it's set in Helvetica, because it has that slight variation in large to thick strokes, and it also has just that really modern sense to it, that they are at the forefront of technology, while also, of course, choosing the color green, the color of earth, the color of being conscious about our habits, So this user experience is just so unique to me in that sense of how you take a company that is all about petroleum, that is all about oil, right? And communicating it in the most green sense possible. It's really interesting to me. NASA is another one of those companies that they had a really set logo for a long time. It's kind of goofy. It had this traditional sense to it. Also trying to be kind of um, future looking forward, it had a very interesting shape going on to it. But now you look at their logo, and this says everything about being as futuristic as possible. I mean, look at that. There's no crossbars in the A. It's all very much the same shapes occurring one after the other. Again, a very modern style of typography. So communicating, I mean, this looks space age to me. This looks like the future. And that's what NASA's all about, is going to the future, breaking these landmark discoveries and creating new technology that's going to get us to the future, that's going to make the future now. And that's what that logo 100% communicates, as well as their choice of type. That's what all of these logos we're looking at are all based on their type choice, and they go hand in hand. I guarantee you, if you were handed the graphic standards book for all of these companies, they would all have a typeface choice for their like body copy, their headlines, hand in hand with their logo choice. Monsanto is another perfect example of these companies that have had history of being perceived as like evil, earth-wrenching companies whose branding communicates the exact opposite of that. Of course it does, because that's their entire goal is to get rid of the perception that the media or just naturally occurs with these companies. If you're not familiar with who Monsanto is a company that is all about producing genetically modified organisms, or basically just the food that we eat today is all based from genetically modified seeds that have all sorts of things going for it that basically just make food grow faster, but at the same time, Monsanto has really hardcore patents on all of their seeds. So if seeds spread and it's being used in areas that quote unquote didn't have the proper certification to use Monsanto's patented seed technology, Monsanto just goes in and sues those companies or those farmers for millions of dollars. So in those circumstances, people look at them with a little bit of a frown. They're not necessarily a very popular company in today's day and age. Yet, their website and their normal branding just communicates this most friendly, earth conscious view that they can, which is just so interesting because, for instance, you look at this conversation thread, quote unquote, that I just took a screenshot from their website, and all of these really funny questions, at least, pull up to me. Why are GMOs banned in some countries? What's wrong with you guys? And they answer it in just like the most politically way possible. It kind of cracked me up going through this. But anyway, the long story short is just look at their branding choices, their typography choices. They're all so easygoing, along with a course of color that ties in hand with type choice and your overall user experience that you're communicating. If this was all black and white, maybe a little bit of red thrown in there, you would have a completely different feeling than having all of this white, gray, and green color tones being presented. Just one other company that I thought was interesting to take a look at is Attendant. Attendant is basically a company that is attempting to help you out in the instance that someone dies. And it's horrible that I laugh at that, but regardless, it's a really hard time for their customers to be in. So their overall user experience, their overall branding that they present needs to be as easily read as possible, needs to be as modern and yet as caring as you can possibly get. So they have this kind of nice, easygoing script typeface for their logo, and then the rest of their choices going with that very neutral decision. I don't believe this is Helvetica. It's probably something like Proxima or some other choice of a sans serif font, but it still communicates that neutrality, that they are not here to judge, they are simply here to help. And that really covers about all that we needed to talk about just briefly about how these choices of typefaces and overall what they are communicating to the end user, what they are communicating as their brand values, So it's really interesting to look at how type just plays such a heavy role in our perception of what a company is and what a company does. So that should be enough to, at the very least, get your brain thinking a little bit more about what these companies are doing when they're making their choices of type, why they are so solid on sticking with their choice of type once they make that decision, how they don't want to stray away from it, how that's just going to confuse the overall perception that their company is, and they want to be as easy to understand as possible. So that was our conversation for this video. After this, we're going to talk a little bit about basically jumping into actually being able to create some advertising for some companies. So taking this knowledge we have to the test. And it's going to be a fun series of videos, so look forward to seeing you guys there.